All right. Okay, we're live. Hey everybody, welcome to the Utah Aviate podcast. Few items of business. One, go like and subscribe the video on YouTube and or Spotify. Just a reminder, we do have our merch shop. It's utahaviate.shopify.com. You can go buy hats, hoodies, t-shirts, and we'll have new products on there every couple weeks. Um, But start off, we've got Scott here. He is our partner in Utah Aviate as of last year.
Yeah.
Scott, have you introduce yourself?
All right. Yeah, I'm Scott Knoll. As Matt said, partners in the flight school here, and love what's going on there. I also own the FBO here at Nephi, and have owned that for a number of years now. Still feels new, but that's been a while. Been flying for 25 years or so. Super passionate about it. I started flying just because of the fascination. I was kind of at a young point in my life and wanted challenges. So, and it wasn't any career-driven perspective. I just really wanted to do it, and it really has turned into a love, and has continued on and continue on for a long time. So, I did my private, all of my training for the most part, initial training in Wisconsin. Flew things like a Cherokee and 152 and the typical training planes. Bought a beach sundowner for my, which is a big, heavy Beechcraft, four-seater Beechcraft, for my instrument training, and really enjoyed flying that with my family. And we had a cabin in northern Wisconsin that we would travel to a lot, and really traveled all around Kentucky and Illinois and Minnesota and kind of the Midwestern states. Got my instrument rating and flew that. I sold that plane after my instrument rating, and then moved into a club where I was flying a DA-40 there and a couple other planes, 182 and an Archer. Flew a tail dragger for a while and started to get my tailwheel endorsement and finished up that. And then really just kind of took a pause, as a lot of people do. I took a pause and had, family and work, and started a couple of businesses, and moved out here to the West, and really saw a need for it here. We own a ranch here, ended up buying a ranch in Nevada. We, for personal reasons and school for the kid reasons, we moved to Colorado as well. So I traveled between Utah, or here in Nephi was the midpoint, traveled regularly from Nevada to here, and here to Colorado. So it became a necessity for me. It turned a 6-hour drive into an hour, an hour or 45 minutes, So it became a business tool, really, and which is what I always saw. And I bought I was flying a Bonanza for a while up in Spanish, and then soon after that bought a Seneca, and really thought, because I was flying the mountains and at night, that twin really, it felt right. So I flew that Seneca, really enjoyed the Seneca. The Seneca was a fun plane to fly. And flew that for a while. As most people, I wanted to go faster and have more pressurization was a goal. So I ended up buying a Cirrus SR-22 in the interim, but then with the eye was, or on the prize was the little Eclipse jet, which I flew for a short time, and really enjoyed that. So circle back to another Cirrus, and now moving into a Meridian. So yeah, aviation is a huge part of me. I'm passionate about it and love flying, and I love following experimental stuff and all aspects of it. I look at a lot of the different things in the news and follow it. So it's certainly been a passion. So
Nice.
yeah.
Let's talk about your training real quick.
Yeah.
So you got your private.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to get your private?
A long time. Because I was poor, just decided I just had started a business and really thought this is what I want to do. So I did it as I could, and had to. It really made me work to find ways of flying. I was just anything I could do. In fact, now that I think about it, what my start was, I bought a basket case little ultralight, a Challenger 2 ultralight, which was a 2-seater, had a Rotax engine on it. It wasn't finished, so I felt like this is a good excuse for me to understand, the wing covering and poly and all the things you do on the fabric type airplane. So I did that. I had a guy there in close to my hometown that helped me finish it. Then we did some training a little bit, and
That was before you were licensed?
that was before I was licensed. Yeah.
And you just bought it because you wanted it?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. And then, I mean, I look back on that, like, how did I not kill myself? I mean, we did some training and I flew it. He signed me off and I flew that thing, at a little grass strip airport and I flew, I don't know, probably flew 50 hours in that. And then that really set the hook for me. Then after that, then
Now, when was this? When you started?
it was right around 2000.
Okay.
Yeah.
So kind of before a lot of the rules and regulations.
Oh yeah.
So you could do whatever you wanted at that point.
Yeah. I mean, the instructor, I mean, I did get some dual, so I got plenty of dual and I felt comfortable in another plane similar, but because that ultralight was a single seater, essentially. I mean, there was a back seat, but there's no way anybody would sit back there. It was just like I hopped in it and flew by myself without even, I mean, yeah, I look back on it and it was a super wide grass strip that was long, like forgiving in so many ways that allowed me probably to do things that in a paved runway probably would have been a little bit more sketchy. But I learned a lot from that. I mean, just understanding the dynamics of flight and turbulence and how things felt and, but as I said, that really set the hook for me. So then I went more conventional and started flew in Waukesha, which is kind of towards Milwaukee, in a little Cherokee and in a flight school and really liked it. It was, even back then, it was the same as here. Like my instructor was a career driven pilot and I lost him with that school, probably 3/4 of the way through my private, and they switched me to an instructor and we just did not mesh. And I'm like, I'm doing this for fun. This isn't fun. So I paused for a little bit. And then I ended up finding a little grass strip with a Cessna 152 that I finished with. Loved that. Rented that for a while after I got my private and built some time. And then, as I said, moved into my instrument rating in that Beechcraft, which I really enjoyed. I mean, that to me was, I don't know if I recall why I was so motivated to get my instrument reading. I guess I knew that I wanted to fly with my family, and I thought that was this wise thing to do, to really, even if I didn't intend to fly in anything serious IMC, I still wanted to have that, fly in the system. So that was a super challenge for me, as it is for most. There's a lot to learn, and there was the challenges of, I'm more of a doer, very hands-on and a doer. And so I just, and then most people would say this, they just want to fly. The learning part is the hard part, discipline to sit down and read books and, know everything. So, but through it all, I loved it. And in fact, I going out and just bopping around is fun. And a lot of people enjoy it, but I much rather file, talk to ATC, I'm all about flows and have got to be that way. And that was the beginning of that through my instrument training. So, yeah.
Would you say, I mean, you're familiar with the traditional training nowadays?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously being involved with the school.
Yeah.
Your daughter flies.
Yeah.
Would you say you would prefer the old school way of learning where they just put you in the plane, kind of send you on your way, or the structured?
I like the structured. I think it's evolved in a good way. I really do. I think there's a lot of benefit to the way that we do things here, and I see how you and Katie do things, and Connor, and I really truly appreciate that. There was a lot of, I mean, the mentality was, let's just get you past the check ride, and then you do a lot of your learning. And I think it's still that way. I mean, I think a DP for your private is going to make sure you're safe enough to get out there, but there's still a lot to learn. And
I mean, every DP I've talked to, they always say private's the license to learn.
Yeah.
And there's always learning.
Yeah. Yeah.
No matter where you get in piloting.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you still learn today.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're going out because you're getting the Meridian.
Yeah.
That requires training.
Insurance, just initial training for satisfy insurance requirements. I'm not a renegade that way. I don't want to think like, oh, I'm fine. I flew the Eclipse jet. I flew these other planes. Like, I'll be fine. I'm like, every plane is different. Everything has its nuances, and I want to get that training, which I think most people are that way. But so the initial 10-hour training, I'm looking forward to, and it'll be good. because of the flight school and different things, I've been pretty lax in my flying over the last year. So it'll be a good way to get refreshed into where I need to be.
It's funny you say like a lot of people they probably think the same way.
Yeah.
As I talk to more and more people,
Yeah.
it seems like there's like, well, I could fly this, I could fly
Yeah.
that, I can land whatever airplane they put
Yeah.
me in, you know. And
Can and should are two
Yeah.
different things.
that's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's a good way to look at it, though. You know, you're going in always wanting to learn, but you know, at least in my aviation career, which isn't as long as yours, but there's always something to learn.
Yep.
Whether that's better skills with landings or
Yep.
the instrument alone, you're always rusty, it seems like.
Oh yeah. I mean, I love the sim that we have now here, and flying in that sim and actually being able to talk to ATC is like, it makes you realize like it's good to do those kind of things and get training regularly, because you just, yeah, especially, you know, for me, I wouldn't call myself old, but 50 plus now. And I mean, you just end up forgetting things. And you know, if you don't refresh that, if you don't fly regularly, and there's nothing better than flying regularly. I mean, the times when I first bought the Cirrus and I was using it to commute almost like a daily commute, but like I felt better about flying then than ever, because I was flying 3 or 4 or 5 times a week, like instructors are.
Yeah.
I mean, you just feel so proficient because you're just doing it all the time. Versus there's so many people that like weekend flyers and maybe don't fly this month, but get into the next and like, man, that, you know, you're probably going to be okay if you just want to bop around the patch but if you want to go into some situations where you're not ready for that because you're not current and you're not comfortable, like that's where this stuff happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say, I guess another thing that kind of comes up is flying with your family.
Yeah.
Right. You've got your wife,
Yeah.
kids. I'm sure with the Meridian, you'll fly them around a little bit more.
100%.
Do you get nervous flying with your family? Are there things that you do like in preparation for those flights?
Yeah.
Or do you just like, well, let's just get in the plane and
I mean, it is different now. It's just probably much more lax because we've done it for so many years, and my kids grew up flying. My wife did not enjoy flying at first. And so I went through that early on, you know, when I was in my 20s, and I first was rated like, yeah, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
When you started to have passengers, and not only passengers, but it was me and my wife and young kids in the back. And, you know, I was very like, all right, everybody quiet, you know, you know, and now it's just like, you know, it's a little more lax.
Yeah. Road trip,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
time down.
Yeah. But on the same respect, there's a time, and my kids, because they've grown up with it, understand, you know, and they just inherently know, you know, the different environments, like, all right, it's time to just like chill and be quiet and whatever. But so to answer your question, I know I'm not so much anymore, whether I have family in or not. There's the same amount of nerves at times, but adding the family to it doesn't necessarily bug me at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that a lot because a lot of our students are not doing this career bound.
Yeah.
They're doing it so they can go buy an airplane,
Yeah.
fly with their family, go out to Florida, go to, you know, California, whatever the case may be. And they're always like, well, you know, they get done with their private or they're close to being done with their private. I just do not feel ready at all.
Yeah.
Where would you say you felt the most comfortable to just get in the airplane? You're not having to think about every little step of the way. You know, it kind of hit me at like 300, 400 hours, it seemed like.
Yeah, 500 hours certainly for me was that, like, okay. And unfortunately, for so many times, like 500 hours can be different for everybody.
Yeah. 500
500 hours consistently or 500 hours over 15 years. I mean, years, you know, that's different. But that 500 hours, and it's just and really my probably around 1,000 hours is when I was really flying regularly. And that I'm a serious fan of the Cirrus, and the Cirrus got me. I was so comfortable in that plane more than any other plane I've flown, that I just felt like I was prepared for anything. And that's not, I'm not saying that like in a complacency way. I really felt like I knew that plane enough to where I knew what to do in situations. I knew it was power, you know, with the Fiki. And I mean, I felt like I flew some hard IFR in situations coming back from Colorado to here, by myself, IMC, icing conditions. And like, I felt comfortable in that plane, and I knew it was going to treat me like it was going to do what it needed to do. So that was fun for me flying that way. And, you know, the Eclipse, spoils you because it's just so powerful. It's so easy to fly. you could bust up through most anything and get up to 41,000 feet and get above the weather. And it just that's a true family traveler for like somebody like myself, I think. I mean, the Meridian's going to be fun, but, so many people talk about this, but when you compare, okay, I'm going to spend so much. And when you compare that plane to like an acquisition price, you can't compare it to anything for what it can do. 360, 70 knots, 41,000 feet. It's a cool little plane.
Yeah.
But it comes at a price,
Yeah.
maintenance and all those things.
So when you got the Eclipse jet,
Yeah.
you have to get type rated.
Yeah.
For those who don't know the process of getting into a jet.
Yeah.
Because that's a multi-engine as well.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. So what's the training like for getting a type rating in an Eclipse jet?
Yeah. There's a lot of people, honestly, and when I did my type rating, I did it with another guy, and he did not have his multi-engine rating, but you just get, because it's centerline thrust, it's different. There's different, you're limited to the center. You can get it easily through the type rating, but you can't then go and hop in a old twin or something and you fly.
So you can fly that without a multi?
Well, you get your multi-engine rating through you can get it through the.
Did you get it the same?
No, I had it before. I had the Seneca. Yeah. So I was, accustomed to, engines out in the Seneca, and although Seneca was counter-rotating prop, so it was much more benign, so to speak, than with the engine outs and learning that. But the Eclipse was just like a non-event. Like you'd pull an engine and it's like, you didn't even know. Yeah. I mean, you knew, but you didn't. It just had a little power. Yeah, a little bit of rudder, but and the speeds were the same. I mean, it just So it was so cool to get into that realm, which is that way in a lot of bigger corporate jets and big. I mean, that's the way it is. And so for me, that was my first taste of that. It had a stick pusher and all the different things. So to be able to go up and do slow flight and stalls and experience a stick pusher and that type rating was pretty cool. Yeah. And through that, I had to do upset recovery training, and I had to do some preparation for that rating, that type rating, which in itself taught me a lot of stuff. So it was that whole process through the type rating and everything that led up to it. And not only was I very proficient at that point because all I did was doing a lot of flying. That was a good period of time for me, and I really felt good about transitioning into the Eclipse. Yeah.
Cool. Out of all the planes that you've had, what would you say was the best starter entry plane for an owner when they're looking at buying one?
Yeah. Man.
I mean, money aside, get that out of there. Let's just say they have an unlimited budget.
Yeah. I've flown I've flown the 150, the Cessna high wings. I've flown the Cherokees. I've flown the Cirrus, flown the Diamonds. And I would say, in my opinion, that's the Cirrus. Yeah. Although I don't have much time, the 22 is the same. I mean, it flies the same similarly. So I would say that the Diamond, I didn't mind, but, the center stick is cool and it's very responsive if you like that. But I like the stability of the Cirrus and the sides, interconnected with, it just was, for me, it was the closest thing to me to maybe the Cirrus or the Seneca or the Cessnas and the Cherokees, which are forgiving. They're mushy and they're just, and I don't actually enjoy that. Like after flying some high performance planes that have power to spare and then going back and fly those, I mean, it's like, holy man, you really got to manage your power and you don't just go. So the Cirrus was, in my opinion, is the winner. Yeah.
I would agree. I mean, I've flown all the same ones kind of you mentioned just barely. And the Diamond's great for training, in my opinion, because of the responsiveness. Yeah. But where, like, at least for you were doing them mainly cross countries everywhere you went. And the Cirrus for those is very solid.
That combination of the Garmin perspective and what Cirrus does, I mean, there is just no, in my opinion, like I've flown a lot of different autopilots that never, like you get turbulence, they're kicking off and you got to deal with that and not capturing, on approaches. That system was so rock solid. I was so impressed by that. Like I hit some nasty turbulence coming over the mountain ranges and it just holds. It holds, it captures, it does what you ask it to do as long as you do it right. I mean, so I'm super impressed by that plane. Yeah.
So you've owned that Light Sport.
Yeah.
Then you went to the Seneca,
I had a little, that Sundowner.
the Sundowner.
Yeah, that little 4-seater, heavy sucker. And the club. So then in the club, we owned the DA-40 Archer 182. There's a tail derringer in there, I think. Yeah, 4 planes. That was a club environment. And I wasn't in that very often. That was, for me, was just fill a gap. And then when I moved west, I got out of that. Bought the Seneca, owned that for a while. I've owned 2 Cirrus SR22s. Bought the DA-40 for the flight school. Bought the I owned the Eclipse jet with another guy, and now the Meridian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of planes.
Yeah. 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 My wife tells me that. Yeah.
Me with my cars, but
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
So when you are flying, I mean, everybody looks at kind of like what their mission goal is for their flights, and how they determine what they want to use the plane for
Yeah.
in buying the airplane.
Yeah.
Yours was just mainly for work, right? I mean, Trent.
More recently, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's always a hard thing. Like, you always think you want to like have this plane. Oh, I take that back. And I owned a Cessna 340. I flew that cabin class twin for a
Oh
while.
yeah, you told me about that.
Yeah.
You recently sold that?
Yeah,
last year?
just recently. That was the worst purchase I ever did. That thing was broke more than it was flying. So I'd probably still be flying that, to be honest. If I would have, I did my initial in that as well for insurance, and that plane I love it, but I just couldn't handle like it. I swore that I'd never buy a 30 or 40-year-old plane again, because that left a bad taste in my mouth. It was like struts flat, tires flat. The engine, I had to end up replacing both engines, and it was my own fault. It was a Hangar Queen plane that sat for too long, and I thought I did the right things and through the pre-buy, and in the end it wasn't. It ate the cams, and luckily not while in flight, but vacuum pumps, and I was just always something. And it was too bad, because I flew to California and Texas, and I flew all over in that thing. I really liked it. It's stable, and I had planned to update the avionics and put modern stuff in it. It had a Garmin 530 and a G500, but it just wouldn't stay flying. The maintenance would kill me, and I just said I got to be done. So I sold that. I have no idea. I completely went off track of what we were talking about, but
We're just talking about the planes you owned.
yeah. But that was a fun one, and that was my first or my second, outside of the Eclipse jet, my piston powered pressurized plane. And you asked me what I look into for buying a plane. That to me what felt right, because it was twin, and I like the security of twin flying over the mountains that we do. I loved the pressurization that I had in the Eclipse jet. So that 340, so those are the main things for me now. Like, here when you fly, I fly regularly at 12.5, 13.5, and man, even an hour flight, you start to get where I'm exhausted and I shouldn't be tired. And I don't get headaches. My body is adapted pretty well. Like, I can fly. I'm always checking my oxygen level, and I'm good. You just learn how to breathe and all that stuff. But it still you're just exhausted still. So the pressurization was a game changer. Like, you just feel good. Your family feels good. So you can take a 3-hour flight and get out of the plane and not feel like, man, that feels like that was all day long, and it wasn't that long. So that to me is a pressurized plane is almost a game, is necessity. And not that I'm above flying anything else, but if you're going to fly a lot, that to me is important. Yeah.
And now the Meridian, pressurized,
Yeah.
single prop.
Yep.
Would you go back to a multi, or do you prefer the single props?
No, I see myself going back to a multi, although, I see this Meridian, I think, a Meridian, in my opinion, hits the sweet spot on cost and efficiency, and it checks the boxes for a lot of things for me. I fly a lot of 200-mile trips, so you can fly a King Air, and you're going to get there maybe 5 minutes later, if that. But just it's tons more fuel and maintenance, and 2 PT6s now, and so this Meridian I think is great, and so to get some turboprop time, and I think that will push me into some different planes. I think, I don't think the Meridian, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe the Meridian could be my forever plane, but I think it could either evolve into maybe a TBM or the Epic. I really like the new Epic, certified Epic. What is it, the 1000E whatever that is, or potentially back to the Eclipse jet. I wouldn't rule that out, but I'm looking forward to flying this for a good chunk, just to really, but I like the turbine, I like the pressurization. That's a good Fiki, icing plane that's decent for its, so it's just a good all around plane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I was just talking to a buddy of mine. He flies for Delta, but he owns a little Bonanza or something like that. But he hates flying it because it's a single engine.
Yeah.
He prefers multi engines.
Yeah.
But then you have the other people who they would prefer single engines because that's less things that can go wrong in flight.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like the big debate with what airplane you should own, if you should go the multi route. I've never flown a multi. I mean, I've been in multis, but I've never, I'm not rated in them or anything. But,
Yeah. I think that single engine piston, single engine turbine, then that's where the difference lies. I don't disagree. Like, I like the security of a twin, but I also can be completely fine with a single when you talk about the dependency of a turbine.
Yeah.
The PT6 is like, they just don't want to stop running.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was doing some research the other day talking about airplanes. So I found out Utah is the leading state in air mobility innovation, which I found interesting.
Wow, that is interesting.
But I wanted to get your opinion or your thoughts on the electric aircrafts.
Yeah.
Utah's huge with it.
Yeah.
They're pushing for the Olympics in 2034.
Yep.
To have those electric air taxis, essentially.
Yeah.
They hold like 12,000 pounds, or 1,200 pounds.
Yeah.
What's your thought on the electrics?
I love it. I mean, I've always been fascinated with it, whether it was like to my car. When I was young, I had a Volkswagen Beetle, and I was convinced I was going to convert that to an electric vehicle, and I never ended up did. But so I'm fascinated by electric. From my story, from my house is I'm completely off grid. So I have multiple wells that are solar. I have 4 houses that are off grid and completely off grid systems. So I have no line power to my houses. So I like electric power and that type of those type of systems. I'm all for. And when I first worked with the city here to help out with managing the airport, that was one of the first things that we had talked about is, and I said to the city manager, like, we got to make sure that when we talk about master plans and planning ahead, like the infrastructure for electric planes, it's like, we got to get on it now. And this was 4 or 5 years ago. Like, it's coming, and the more that we can be out ahead of it, the better off we'll be. Because I think it definitely is the future. Yeah. I think it's cool to see some of these companies that are doing it. I think see how that all shakes out with who lasts and where that goes. But I think it's cool to see the battery technologies kind of eking its way there to where it can make it work. And I love it. I think it's awesome.
Doesn't make you nervous?
No. Not at all.
Out of battery power. I guess same as fuel, but
it really is. Yeah, not at all. I think technology has become so amazing, and I think for the longest time, maybe you don't remember, but in my experience, like, there was so much time that it just wasn't. People couldn't put their dependency in, like, even GPSs. Like, for a while, it was like, let's tune the VORs and get, but it's become so dependent. Like, the systems are so reliable, and things just don't crash like they used to. And so when you think about all that, and you think about all the systems, I saw at Oshkosh last year, the company that's putting autonomous systems into an Robinson R44, I think, or maybe it's an R66, that completely flies itself, and you can fly it as a pilot, but it's pretty well doing everything. So you're just managing systems. So it's kind of scary for, like, the flight school perspective. Like, it'll take a while, I know, but I just wonder what it'll look like here in 20, 30, 40 years.
Do you think automation will replace pilots?
I do.
Do you think people will fly in airplanes that are automated?
I think for a while, that's what we'll see as the transition. But eventually, just like military drones and whatnot, it's either flying by itself and you're just programming it, or, there's so much capability there, and the technology is honestly there, but it takes a long time. But I think the pilot, as we know it, in the future, a long time away, is going to be obsolete, I think. Yeah.
It's funny because I thought about this for a while, and I don't think I would get into an airliner plane,
Without a pilot.
without a pilot.
Yeah.
If it's if some dude's on the ground, he's like, well, it's gonna crash in the mountain. I'm gonna go home.
Yeah. Yeah.
Take off his headset and
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I feel like having someone there whose life is also on the line.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it would go away from like dual cockpits.
Yeah.
You'd have a single cockpit management system.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it's one of those things,
It'll be a while. I think. Yeah.
But I think a lot of people getting into aviation think that way, but it also, with the need of pilots, I think will speed up the automation
100%.
process.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And I think a pilot today that's learning is so I don't know. I guess I don't know what as a pilot would maybe get hired commercially and fly and train for an airlines. I would think and expect that it's way different than it was 20 years ago as a pilot starting out, and and that's I don't know, and it's interesting to think of what it's going to look like in the next 20 years as you jump another 20 forward. So yeah.
It'll be interesting to see. I don't know. I don't think I trust a plane without a pilot.
Yeah, no, I'm with you
personally.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great because like flying the Cirruses. I've been in the Vision Jet. I've seen the technology like with the safe return on those.
Yeah.
You just push the button and it takes you in. It lands. I even think it pops open the door for you.
Yeah.
It's a cool system.
Right.
But is it better used in an emergency situation or for all flying in general? Now we have autopilot, and which like in the Diamond, it's awesome. The Cirrus's autopilot's great.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like in the Meridian. Probably the same type.
Same.
Of system.
This Meridian that I'm flying is a little bit older, so it's not as good as the newer ones. But the newer, like the ones, are pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But,
I think that air taxi's going to be a crazy deal.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I think it's like a 1 point something billion project. It's going to employ a lot of people. You're going to need pilots for all of them.
Yep.
I think Utah is going to be huge for pilot hirings.
Yeah.
As these people go through.
The interesting thing will be is like how that will look on a training environment. Like, will it look like, are we training in electric planes that are setting up pilots to transition into that? Or is it just conventional like it is now? Like, I wonder if that will change as that becomes more,
I'm sure there'll be, I don't know, maybe added ratings. You'll probably get your commercial, but then like you have like your CFI, CFII.
Yeah. Maybe
there'll be a taxi operation,
right.
Right. That'd be interesting and to jump ahead of, because they plan on having hundreds of those flying in Utah,
right?
Especially during the Olympics.
Yeah.
Yeah. But probably a lot of time management issues that you have to resolve.
Totally.
Of how far you can go, what airports you can go to, making sure you're doing enough time where you don't have to charge the batteries, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But do you see the electricity affecting, because you manage the FBO, you manage the fuel. That's how the FBO receives income.
Yep.
Do you see that affecting going electric? Or
no, just different, well, and that's part of what I said. Like, we have a fuel farm now, we have fuel tanks, and what we need to have is infrastructure to then put a charging station, and that's going to be monetized just like fuel. Yeah. So it's just different, but it will be the same. And so I don't know how that will look, but I'm sure there'll have to be some sort of way that as someone comes in, I always wondered at one time, like, are we swapping batteries or are we doing a fast charge? And I think that's, that's maybe still yet to be determined, but I think the way battery technology is even advanced in the last couple of years, like it's clearly possible that we're going to be able to charge in like 10 minutes, similar to you walk into a gas station, walk back out, you're charged back up, maybe not full, but enough. And I see that would be the way. So and that doesn't just happen. Like, how do you move that type of electricity? It takes some infrastructure. So
I know with the Diamonds, because the DA40 and the DA20, they released last year, they got certified in their electric ones.
Yeah.
And theirs is you just pop out the battery, you go put in a new one, you get another, I think it's like an hour and 30 minutes of flight time, something like that. And then you just swap out batteries. And while you're flying, the other one can be charging.
Right.
So you have 3 batteries sitting there all charging. You just swap them out each flight.
Yeah.
Which, saves a lot of downtime.
Yeah.
And I don't know if all airplanes will go that route with swap out batteries.
A standardized battery.
And had a farm and kind of ran it like a like a rental car company or
Yeah.
U-Haul, like
Yeah.
the batteries are
It's like propane tanks at the grocery store.
yeah.
You know?
Like if you just had a farm of batteries all charging,
Yeah.
they come swap them out.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's kind of a way to think about it too.
Weird.
So
Yeah.
until you run out of batteries.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
So I know Heber's huge on the clean air, their airport. They're big on the clean air type flying. They promote any airplane that comes through that's, going electric or so.
Interesting.
I'd be curious to see if they ever go solar on an airplane because you're so much higher.
Yeah.
If you get a higher charge, being
Yeah.
higher in the,
I don't know if you ask Elon Musk, it just doesn't pencil out, but I don't know. I think as things become more efficient and takes less power, I would think that eventually that's so. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So we have a few fans of the podcast.
Nice.
Kind of
Nice.
that
Yeah.
a little earlier before we started.
Yeah.
We got a question. Now, doesn't really apply to you because you don't have your commercial.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Have you ever thought about getting your commercial?
I was asked so many times. In fact, I had a good friend that flew for Delta when I was, this was probably 10 years ago. And he's like, he and I flew together a little bit. He's like, you could easily fly for Delta if, just get your commercial rating. And, I just never saw myself doing that. It didn't speak to me. I think in hindsight, I probably should have, because I think even outside of what it can allow you to do, it makes you a better pilot. So in that perspective, I probably wish I would have, but I don't know.
Would you still consider it?
I probably would consider it, especially having so close knit with instructors and Katie and you, and I think I could do it. I don't know, I'd consider it.
Well, so I mean, it doesn't really apply to you, but I mean, with Katie being a pilot, maybe going airliners, maybe going charter, she doesn't really know. But the question was, how do you get from the 250 total time, which is your commercial license or CFI, to the 1500 and still make money? Because I guess what they were saying is about 80% of the people who get their commercial do not make it to the airliners. They have to quit. They don't have the money. They don't have the cash flow to pay for the time building.
Yeah.
What would you say in terms of that and advice for someone getting into aviation?
That's hard. And aviation is probably not alone in that perspective, just that there's the getting from point A to point B, and rightly so. That 1,500-hour mark is there for a reason. I mean, you need to be proficient to start to fly professionally, but that doesn't solve the problem of the starving pilots and bridging that gap. I think for me, and I think this comes down to more of a societal thing. I mean, you either have to want it or you don't. And if you don't want it, that's going to be painful. Clawing those hours and figuring out a way and, driving distances and, it never works out quite the way you want to get so many hours, it never is quite that. So that's hard. I mean, I think that you have to really want it. And that comes down to anything, like how hard are you willing to work and what are you willing to sacrifice? Because it isn't just going to happen. So, I think that's the same with anything. So I think it just comes down to, how bad you want it. And if you want it bad, there's a long list when you really get to it, and you just got to get out to the airports and ask around. You're pulling gliders, you're driving you're flying for the drop zones and dropping. There's lots of different things that you can do if you want it.
Yeah.
And that's just what you have to decide.
Yeah. Now here at Nephi, I mean, we're a small airport, but how many operations do we have here that would be a job for someone?
Yeah.
I mean, we've got the flight school.
Right.
We've got the parachuters.
Right.
We've got the tow gliders.
Yep.
I don't know if Will does anything with his stuff.
I think there again, he'd probably have to be in that 1,500-hour mark for his stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, just at a little airport, there's 3 different operations
right.
that you could potentially get a job.
Right.
And I mean, I guess the route most people go is the CFI route.
Correct.
Right. You do as many hours as you possibly can per month. Try to hit your 1,500 in a year.
Yeah.
Normally it takes a year and a half.
Right.
But then you run into the issue that I would say most flight schools don't pay more than $20 an hour.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you say it's a sacrifice. How would you coach someone or help someone work through that on kind of managing that time? Because also you had a bad instructor.
Yeah.
I've had bad
Oh,
instructors.
I've had multiple bad instructors.
So someone who's not necessarily built to be an instructor,
Yeah.
that seems like the only route. I mean, how do you work around that?
Yeah, that's hard. It really is. I don't, I wish there was a clear answer for that because I think a lot of people would be doing it. But that's just that part of that sacrifice, and you have to really want it.
Yeah.
And it's, it's a year. It's a year and a half. We all have to do that, and that's just what you do instead of thinking you get all your ratings and like, boom, I'm on for the airlines. It just doesn't work that way. So you just, you have to suck it up and decide, I don't want it. Nobody wants to probably be an instructor and have to deal with that. And maybe there's some people that obviously do like it and are lifetime instructors, and that's awesome. But that's not for everybody. So it just comes down to that willingness to work hard to find. You could be instructing and towing gliders and doing it. There's different things that you could be doing all simultaneously to build hours. So you just got to get out there.
Yeah.
That's good.
Now, from a business owner perspective, we both own the business. You own multiple businesses.
Yeah.
People going in with resumes or applying. I mean, I get 30 emails a month from potential CFIs, and I honestly probably trash all of them.
Yeah.
Because if they're not willing to come in and talk to me or show up with a resume, dress nice, good presentation, I'm not going to remember them.
Yep.
I mean, what would you say to someone, let's going over to Leon over at the skydiving operation, come in here. You said go see every airport in the area. I mean,
you got to go to the airport.
Yeah.
And that's that's how I started. I was so fascinated by it, aviation in general. Like I would just go out to this dinky little airport where I grew up and there was nothing going on. And I would sit there and just in hopes that maybe somebody would show up that you could talk to and like, could I, whether or not it turned into a flight with them or, so that was my reality. So you just have to decide like, and I think that is, that's maybe the difference I see now. And I don't mean in a negative way. Like there's, the need for pilots has created a career opportunity. And what that creates is people coming out of school that don't necessarily have the passion for aviation. They just see it as an opportunity. And that to me is the recipe for like, you don't quite have the love for aviation. Like I love aviation. I love flying. And if you're doing it just because it's maybe going to be a good paying job and you can work 15 days a month or whatever, and you want, there's good opportunities there, but you don't really love the flying, that will make it hard.
Yeah.
Those are the people that aren't going to show up to the airport just to watch planes fly and talk to people and end up with opportunities that way. Those people that are out the airport are going to be the guys that are, or the gals that are getting the opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah. And now Katie, she wasn't always wanting to be a pilot.
Yeah.
But I guess through you, obviously flying, she got the urge to want to fly. She now loves it. She's one of our instructors. Her moving forward in her career as flying, what's an advice that you would give her in terms of like how to go after that dream, right? It's your own kid.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, for me, I was blown away by that. I mean, as I said, they grew up flying, but never in a million years did I think that she'd be doing what she's doing now. Didn't, she appreciated the capabilities that it gave us, but never wanted to sit in the front seat. It was always, my middle guy, Ben, or, so when she decided she wanted to do that high school project for like getting her pilot's license, it was called Capstone, and it's her getting a license. Like I was like, hell yeah, like let's go. And it kind of created this scenario where I probably went overboard with like giving her opportunities and like putting these things in front of her, and to be honest, probably drives me to buy and look at different planes and do different things because I appreciate so much that she's starting to build this passion for aviation. And so I'm living through her coming up through that young, like, and because, she didn't, she was probably one of those pilots, and she can, I'm sure she'll be here at some point in time and she can tell her own story, but, she wasn't passionate about aviation, but I think the passion is developing now in her early 20s because she sees how cool it is, and she loves flying and loves to fly different things, wants to maybe do helicopters and wants to do all these different things, which I'm like, that's awesome for me. That's a win for me. And so just encouraging and giving opportunities to me is how you like develop or, create that passion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you lead her one way or another in terms of career?
Yeah. I probably have. Like, I don't, I always, and it's a personality thing. I always envisioned her doing on the corporate side. And
Charters.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Not necessarily that I would like if she's like, man, I really want to fly for, Delta or whoever, like that would be great. And I think there's great opportunity there. But I just, just in flying with her and knowing her, I always felt like that was maybe not the direction it was going, and it still might be. But so I think for me, it's really connecting with people that I know and say, hey, go fly with this guy in this Pilatus or this citation or whatever, and get a taste of what that is. And those are the opportunities that you can then know, like, I think I could love this. Yeah. And that's how I felt about helicopters. Like, and I've always thought about adding on that rating. And for me, it's also a dual purpose, because it's like, maybe you could love helicopters. Let's go do this. Let's get our ratings. And then maybe it'll go nowhere. Maybe it will go somewhere.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's always interesting to hear people trying to figure out what route they want to go.
Yeah.
Their mindset,
yeah.
especially in my position as basically being the one to hire everybody that comes through.
Yeah.
And it's hard looking at someone when I know, like, they are going to time out, they're going to move on, right? Like, as a business owner, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
But I also don't want someone to be an instructor forever, because it is draining on your your mental mindset and all the things that you get to see and deal with. But I think it goes to show, I mean, Katie's here at the airport all the time. But looking at any other pilot that I know that builds time quickly, they're at many airports all the time, hanging out. Like you said, you went and hung out at the grass strip.
Yep.
If you're out there connecting, talking to people, who knows, you might be able to sit right seat for a bunch of flights, and that's time towards your hours.
Yep.
Yep.
But yeah, I guess, I mean, for me, looking at someone who's trying to contemplate that basically, 1,200 hours essentially that they need.
Yeah.
One, get in as many planes as you possibly can and go talk to business owners that,
there's a lot to be learned sitting in the right seat and seeing different people make sometimes bad decisions. And I think there's a lot of good stuff that can come from that time, from you getting your ratings to where you need to be, whether you're flying or you're not flying in that environment. It's just a lot of good scenarios to be a part of.
Yeah.
Dealing with insurance on your airplanes.
Yeah.
They kind of dictate what you can and can't do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and I think that's where a lot of people don't know what route to go, because you see job listings and postings, and it's like they, technically, as a commercial pilot, you can go work at any of them besides the airliners.
Mm-hmm.
But insurance controls a lot of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would say to anybody, your benchmarks would be like your 500 hours is a big one.
Yep.
And then 750 hours is another big one.
Yep.
And there's plenty of jobs out there that allow that. In those time brackets, 250 hours is just so little.
Yeah. And what I would add to that, and what I've learned through insuring multiple planes and getting added to policies and whatnot, the things that I get asked a lot, that is like, insurance underwriters like to see that you're in different aspects of flight, and not aspects of flight necessarily, but different categories. So like getting your tailwheel endorsement and complex time. And so sometimes that comes at a cost, but getting yourself into situations where you can actually, get some, a complex plane and learn the aspects of that and log that time, that goes a long way. So it isn't just, 1,000 hours of flying a little Cessna 152, although it can work. But, I think you're better off, and insurability, it'll go a long ways to get some different things to fly.
Now, if someone showed up here, they were cool, they're nice, friendly, and they saw you flying in on your Meridian, and, you guys hit it off, and he's like, hey, can I come sit right seat whenever you have flights?
Totally.
I mean, is that ever an issue for someone who owns an airplane, in your opinion?
Yeah. I mean, not everybody's open to that. But I can still remember the people like me approaching and asking, and it's expensive. I mean, you're asking someone else to, and of course, most people who do it don't ask for any money. And you can split costs and do all the things that you can do, but most people just do it because they see that you are passionate about flying, and most of those aviators or pilots are passionate as well. And so to share that experience, most people are more than willing to do it. Not everybody. I think we've talked about this. I think that's something that I'd love to do here at Nephi, is to have an event and pool the local pilots and bring people in and give rides. And like, I think so many people who always think about flying and think they can or whatever, like that's gives a good opportunity for somebody to come out and try it out. And might be just enough to say, like, I want to do this, even if it's not for a career. Like I was like, I'm going to figure out how to make this happen and do it. So I love those times or those events where people have an opportunity to share their love of flying with other people, and not at a crazy cost,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's one of my biggest difficulties, that running the flight school, is I want to get everybody in the airplane. I want to get my friends, I want to get my brothers, I want to get family in there. And it's like, I mean, there is a cost, and I'd love to give it all away for free, but it's much easier to help someone out when you do see the passion in flying. Especially when they're probably going to join up, or they're going to go a long way with it, which I'm sure you saw that the second Katie got the interest, you're like, you're going to pour everything into it. So
for sure.
What was I going to say with that? I was just going to go back to the building your time, I guess. How long you're at, what, 1,500 hours?
A little bit less, I think 12 something. Yeah.
How long did it take you to get that many hours? I guess you started back in what?
It really went, I went in spurts, so my first 10 years, it was not that much. I just wasn't, like a lot of people, like I didn't have the money. Like I wanted to fly, but it's like, I don't how, because I didn't have. So as I got more mature in business and more secure, there's the funds were there. And then it would come in, in big spurts where I would do some time building. And to be honest, I mean, since I moved to Utah and started to fly, that's where it really accumulated the hours. So, yeah.
I mean, you can do it pretty quick
you can.
If you're in the plane a lot.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously, we've got our time builder airplane, the little Remos.
Yeah.
It's not the funnest, comfortable plane, but for $100 an hour,
I think back to flying a Cessna 150. I would fly that thing any day, all day long, over a little Cessna that, that just has no business being in the sky, at least here at high elevation. That, I mean, I think that's, it's got autopilot, it's got everything you'd need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of, I guess, creative ways you can go at building time.
Totally.
So, and if you get your instructor's license, I mean, there's a lot more opportunities there. Like I was saying, with the different time intervals, your 500 hours, a lot of jump schools can hire there.
Yeah.
I know Leon normally is looking for pilots.
Yep.
The glider pilots is 500 hours from my understanding.
I think you're right.
And then 750 is kind of like your charter hour bracket.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I don't know how many charters you know of, but it seems like there's a lot.
There is, yeah. Especially like for us here in Utah, where you go north and get to Spanish and Provo and Salt Lake. I mean, there's just so many.
Yeah.
And there again, you just have to network and find those people.
Yeah. Found it interesting. I was just looking at some stats with that. So there's 806,000 pilots in the U.S. as of 2024, which is a lot.
Yeah, it is.
But only 16% of them are in the airliners, and only 10% have a commercial rating.
Wow.
Yeah. I thought just the amount of pilots there are, which means there's not a whole lot of competition, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, with how many airplanes there are, how many charter operations there are, the airliners in general.
Seriously. Yeah.
I mean, it just seems like there's always a shortage for those pilots.
Yeah.
I'd be shocked if you can't find a job unless you're just not personable, but
right.
I mean, even those,
it's going to be a problem for you wherever you go.
Yeah.
That's okay.
So, now, with running the airport, do you have any other kind of, I guess, business plan or business ideas of startups that you want to incorporate in aviation?
I think the big thing for the airport, it was, Nephi was always a little too small to justify some of the big boy stuff. And I think we're right in the middle of that transition of like, okay, we're growing and we're kind of almost, for our current limitations, busting at the seams. And I like the idea of, we have a fuel truck now, and that's just coming online. I like the idea of expanding the FBO and having a much more FBO type feel. And I think that's a little bit out ahead of maybe where Spanish or Provo or Salt Lake is. But I think I'd much rather do it now without having to lose too much money before the business will come, I think, if you have that platform. So that to me is, it's not necessarily a new business, but expanding the FBO into a more something beyond just self-serve fuel. And that's what it's been now. And that's just been what it could, you can't make it more than it is, but with aviation in Utah and coming south and how much of it's grown, we're poised pretty well to see a lot of that growth. And so, you talk about the Olympics and some different things there. I think the next 5 years here will continue to see massive growth. So I love the idea of a new FBO, a potential restaurant on the field, which would be super cool. We have acrobatics here. We have, gliders. We have parachute. I mean, we're, I think, a little bit unique, and I think there's a lot of stuff that put us on the map. And so a nice aviation mecca of sorts is the way I call it. Like there's a restaurant where you can sit and watch all those different aspects of flying. The flight school will be there. There's just a lot of cool things. So I'm really like the idea of that, and I think that's going to be my focus. The city of Nephi is great, and the city manager is great as far as open to possibilities. And so we have a good relationship that we can kind of talk about things, and I think that may bring about, we're in the middle of a master plan, right? And that may bring some potential improvements that way too, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Now the master plan's public, right? I mean,
It
you
is.
go on the website.
Yep.
So people who are curious to see what the plans are for Nephi, they can go check
Totally.
that out.
Yep.
Because right now, they're just in phase 1.
Yeah.
Right.
We just picked the engineer, and so we'll start in the next couple months with really outlining. And this is the first time I've been experienced with it, but I think it can take as long as a year. I don't know as though it'll take us that long, but
the master plan.
Yeah. So the process is kind of painful, but there's such a demand for hangar space, and that's probably the biggest thing that will come of this, is that allow us to identify the new areas for expansion and then move forward. We unfortunately, in my opinion, kind of did things haphazardly and probably weren't as efficient. We were not as efficient as we could with the space, but it was just because all of a sudden everybody wanted to build a hangar, and it was like, okay, here and here and here. And so we did our best, and I think that master plan will really allow us to make some good decisions on how it looks. What's the look and feel of the Nephi airport going to be? Because I think you go to a lot of airports and you can see that. Richfield comes to mind, I think, is one. It's just like there's just kind of little areas all over in different directions. And so I like the idea of, you're going to create an airport that I think has a future. Like, let's really think about how we want this to look. So.
Yeah. Well, Nephi's growing like crazy.
Oh, man.
I just remember I was doing real estate like 5 years ago and trying to sell homes down here. They're like $130,000 homes.
Yeah.
There's just the main street, really. That was all there was, but it's grown like crazy. We're almost, probably in the next couple of years be touching Santaquin, and, Mona, Santaquin, and Nephi will all be kind of interconnected.
Oh, man, the commercial stuff that's being built. I mean, to see all this stuff on the south end expand, and new hotels and big restaurants and multiple fast food. I mean, there's just a lot going on here. Yeah.
And you've been with the airport for how many years?
I guess it's been about 5 years. Is that right?
Managing it? Or like
only about the FBO. Yeah. I was looking about that time that I bought the Seneca. I had it on lease up at Spanish for a while, and it was like, I just wanted to fly it more. And so I knew that wasn't going to be long term. And I couldn't find a hangar. And this hangar, I was just simply looking for a hangar. And then the FBO came up for sale, and it was, at the time, was probably overpriced. But I thought, all right, if I buy this hangar, I can have the fuel sales, it can offset some of my costs. And so it was purely just it wasn't intended to be what it is today, but it's turned into, it's cool. I moved my office here. We built a number of hangars in that span, since then, and continue to. And so it's really turned into kind of a labor of love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess you can kind of track the amount of traffic that comes through fuel cells.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
In the last 5 years, has it substantially grown? Like, noticeably, or is it just kind of trickled up, it growing?
Yeah. I would say the biggest Achilles heel was our fuel system. We, I inherited, it was a mess. The pumps didn't work. The tank, I mean, the credit card terminal was never worked. Everything about it broke on a regular basis. And so I think for the longest time we were known for like, is the fuel going to work at Nephi? So I mean, and that's frustrating. And the relationship is the city owns the fuel system. We manage it. And so we pushed hard and we've invested a lot of our own money in updating it. So we've come a long way. So I think that's been the biggest limiting factor. But now we have a new terminal, or credit card terminal. We have new pumps. We have a lot of new everything with adding this fuel truck. So even through all that and those struggles, we saw increases. The last 2 years has been though massive, 40%, 50% increase. Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's, I think, a product of, we have finally are seeing somewhat consistency with our dependability of fuel, and, there's just much more aviation going on as well. Yeah. So,
and I guess with the master plan, they plan on opening up the whole airport almost, right? I mean, at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of acreage to expand into. A lot of it's honestly just leased to farmers right now. And I think once there's a demand for aviation, then it's written in the rules of that. If there's a need for it, the agricultural gets out, the leases end, and we expand. So yeah, there's a lot of room to grow. They even talk about extending runway. So
it's a pretty long runway.
It is already. Yeah, yeah.
But 6,500 feet.
I think it's 6,000. Isn't it 6,000?
Oh yeah, 6,000.
6,000.
Yeah.
But I think there's room for another 1,000 that they have had in the original master plan, and that'll probably come up in this master plan discussion and figure out, you got to put in for that money with the feds, and then figure out what the schedule would be for that expansion. There's so much more. We need ramp space. We need hangar development ground. So that to me is down the line. Yeah. I don't think that's a limiting factor for us now, but yeah.
Did you ever think that you were going to get into owning a flight school?
No, not at all. I mean, when you and I talked, whenever that was that in May, maybe?
Yeah, May.
Yeah. No, but what I knew is I didn't want it to go away.
Yeah.
So I loved the fact that you guys were here originally, and when things there was some changes moving, I'm like, let's figure this out, because like this, we're just getting going.
Yeah.
So I think I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, I know. I still remember when I called in, because I sent an email to the Nephi Jet Center, and I got a response that there was no hangar availability. And I don't remember why I said it. I was like, oh dang, that sucks. Like, I called in then to confirm.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that sucks. We were hoping to do a flight school, and either you jumped on the call right after or called me within like 5 minutes, and you're like, oh no, we'll make space.
Yeah.
Like, like it was a huge push to start that up, which is awesome. Awesome for me. It was great.
Yeah.
But I mean, for you, I don't know if you've seen benefits of having a flight school, like if that helps with the presence of Nephi.
Totally. I mean, the flight school is the first part. Getting a good, dependable, reliable mechanic here on the field will be the next thing, whether that's through us or somebody else. But the flight school was a huge piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do you see like the mechanic side going? Because I think next week we plan on having Reed on.
Yeah.
Kind of talk about how working on airplanes is, but from an operation standpoint, what do you see that route going for the airport?
I think, for the longest time, I told myself it was driven more so by like, what type of activity is going on at the airport. And I probably now, I think it's less that now, to be honest, because you can create a business through, like, you have a shop on the field. They're so in demand, good mechanics and good A&Ps. And so you can say like, there's nothing going on here at Nephi. I'm not saying that's the case now, but that could be the situation. And you bring in people because you have a good shop. So I think it's twofold now. I think there's such an opportunity to have a reliable mechanic, because everyone's so busy north. Like, it's not that big of a deal. It drives fuel sales. It there's business on the field now because we have so many more planes on the field now. So it's a win-win. And Reed's been great to have, and hopefully that continues and maybe even grows and turns into something. So I think I think it's needed here 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if anybody sees this and has ideas,
call me.
call Scott. Or
Yeah.
you can email me.
Yeah.
Get you connected.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think a mechanic shop would be awesome. I mean,
I do too.
I'm mechanically inclined, but I don't care to work on my own airplane. So
Yep.
I think it'll be helpful.
Oh, for sure. And I think there's, there's always been a space that was dedicated for somebody that wants to come in and have a huge facility, whether it's interiors or avionics or, just, or all of the above, maybe. The city has always said, like, we have this space dedicated for that. And I mean, it's still to this day, we can figure it out. Yeah. Even with the fact that we're like scrambling to find any spot to build a hangar, that still exists. So I think that the city even knew, and that goes back to even before I got involved, that that's important to be able to cater to that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I guess switching topics, what is your biggest frustration in aviation, whether that's training or flying around with people, being at small local airports? I hear it a lot. I hear what people like and dislike. I just, see what your perspective is.
Yeah.
Especially with so many pilots, right? I mean, we get a lot now here at Unified during the summer.
You maybe turned my thinking in a little direction with that last comment. So,
okay.
So I mean, originally I was going to say insurance. I think the insurance is so the Achilles heel of aviation. It's too expensive, and I understand why. But I'm like, we got to figure out how to make it more affordable.
Yeah.
And that so that it was the first thing I was going to say. The second part of it, I think, is
before you jump over, insurance, being frustrating, expensive, hard to get, depending on what planes you're looking at.
Yep.
I mean, because you had me help you with the Meridian. Let's see if we can get a quote. And they wouldn't even insure just Meridian in general. That was just like, nope, we don't do that one.
Yeah. Yep.
What do you see? I think the big problem with insurance is we have a lot more airplanes, which also equates to a lot more claims.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Which hurts everybody else who doesn't have claims because we got to pay a higher premium.
Yep.
What are some ways that you've seen that help decrease the cost of insurance? Or
I don't know. I mean, I wish I had a clear answer to that, and I don't. And I wish there was, because I feel like there has to be. I don't know if it's going to involve getting more companies out there to write insurance, because you're limited. There's not that many ultimately.
Especially for a flight school. I mean, we've got like 4 options.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I really think that finding other companies that want to get involved, and then I don't know if it's getting creative with taking a different look at really pilot scenarios. And I feel like there's very much you're going to fit into this mold. And if you don't fit in this mold, the premiums are crazy. And I had a broker a few years ago that, and I still use her, but I really felt like they would give me a quote, and I'm like, I didn't even think to factor that in when I was going to look at this plane. And now I'm getting to this, like, I don't know if I can justify paying. My insurance monthly premium is just as much as my loan payment potentially is, which is crazy to me. And actually, through talking with her, and she went back to underwriters, like, there was more give and take than I thought that there ever would be. So I think figuring out how to get good underwriters and I'm no expert on this topic, but I do know it's a topic of discussion, and figuring out how we can get the good pilots who are proficient and maybe don't fit the mold in like complex time or this or that or whatever. Even through some initial requirements, but then have the premium reflect that. It's like, no, your premium's $30,000 and you still got to do 25 hours, and maybe it'll go down next year. And in my experience, it doesn't even end up going down. They always tell you like, yeah, it'll go down next year. I'm like, when is that happening? So I don't know. It's a racket to me. And to be honest, when able, like, you really have to think seriously about, do you just self-insure? You got the liability, but like, when you have the ability to self-insure, I mean, you have to think hard about it because it's so freaking expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know a few little ways, but I think, changing the demographics, like, I think if you're an instrument commercial rated, why can't you get a better premium than someone who's just a private pilot?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or, I know there's some other benefits, like if you join AOPA or, those other programs, you get slight decreases in cost, but you got to pay for that program. So I don't know if it really matters.
Yeah.
But I think a more pilot specific. I mean, they ask for all your information anyway.
Yeah.
But it seems like every year I have more hours.
Yeah.
It doesn't change my premium,
No.
even though I have more hours.
No.
Like where I think it should be
You
like that.
you go online and say, how much is it going to cost to insure a Piper Meridian? And like all these people like, oh yeah, you know, like, I don't know, $5,000. I'm like, I don't know how you ever get to the point where it's that. And, you know, granted, some of those are aged posts and whatever, it changes, but seems like there's a very, it's someone who wants to get to that point. You just have to assume you're going to pay a ton for insurance.
Yeah. That's probably the biggest cost factor of an airplane.
Yeah.
Especially as you get into the big ones.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I don't know, like you mentioned you might want a TBM at one point. I'm sure those are $50,000-$60,000 a year.
Yeah, and so much is driven by the hull value and whatnot. But yes, it definitely is more. Yeah.
So it's a big cost.
Yeah.
Now, on the other side of frustrations of like flying, I guess, or your own personal frustrations with aviation that you would like to see changes in.
I don't know. I mean, I get it to a certain degree, but there's so many people out there flying that should not be flying around. And like the way I don't know if it's just as I get older, you start to like, you get stuck on certain things, but radio communications and like the way people communicate on radios, like that was the one thing, like when Katie and I started to fly together, I'm like, and I learned this from, you know, like even most recently, the type rating training. I flew with a guy who was a naval Top Gun instructor, a naval aviator. And I learned so much about when to talk and when not to talk and how little you need to say and how it like just, I don't want to hear your life story as you're like, I'm going back to Provo and I'm going to park. I'm going to get McDonald's afterwards. Like, I don't need, like, there's too much chatter on the radio. And that to me, that if I can say there's a thing that I get, like, just tell me what you're doing so I know where you are and what you're going to do. I don't know. No, I need to know where you're going and what you're going to do. And there's just too much talk. So especially now, I mean, there's so much training out there, so many training planes. And so everybody talking too much, it gets to be too much. Yeah. So it's that to me is like teaching people to have clear, concise, accurate radio calls is so important.
Yeah. That's probably one of my biggest frustrations, especially as an instructor.
Yeah.
Where I've been doing it for so many years now and so many hours.
Yeah.
When I hear other poor instruction, especially on calls.
Oh, I know.
But I mean, my first instructor was like super anal on calls. He was like, he'd yell at me in the airplane. And I'd, you know, like, hey, crap, I don't want to speak because I didn't want to mess up.
Yeah.
But I thought that was super helpful in the long run, you know, and now, especially being here in Nephi, I mean, it's funny because the calls that I would hear in Texas are 100% different than what I hear here.
Really?
I've never heard some of the lingo. I've never heard of the call. Like the first time I flew here, there was another, flight school airplane overflying the airport. Well, they weren't even overflying. They were 10 miles out, flying westbound, so not even towards the airport.
Yeah.
And they're still making their 10, 5, 10, 15, 30-mile calls. I'm like, where did this call structure come from?
Yeah.
It just blows my mind.
Yeah.
And as an instructor, I'm like, I would love to correct them. Be like, you don't need to make those calls. You're not even in the vicinity of the airport.
You know, and it's funny because now with the ADSB, you typically can look to see like, but before that, when you had all these people calling and like just saying what they were doing, like it just almost creates confusion. It causes more problems because you're like, now you're taking away your attention to thinking you need to be looking for someone when that person has no significance to your flying in the terminal area. Yeah.
I mean, from your experience and your training, what would you say the proper like call procedure is? It's like, let's say just here at Nephi. I mean, would you make calls 10 miles out if you're not coming to the airport?
No.
If you're flying away from the airport?
No. And right or wrong, I used to call overflying the field. If I was coming, I mean, I remember I used to fly when I would fly here and you'd fly right over Price. I would fly into Colorado and it's like, I'm at 14,000 feet. Why? I don't need to tell. Nobody needs to know that I'm flying over the field. And even if it's 10,000 feet, if you're 2,000 feet over the pattern, I mean, if you're right over the field, I think making those unnecessary calls for like transitioning calls, and sometimes with jumpers and gliders, there's a time where it's appropriate.
Yeah.
But most times it's not, in my opinion. So, I mean, just being, 10 miles and you're going to enter left downwind or left downwind for whatever. So those I think are good. You're letting everyone know like, hey, I'm coming. And then you call when you're entering the downwind and then making your calls. That to me is perfectly fine. And even within those though, I think it's like just being very clipped, where you are, what you're doing, who you are. And I'm just, you don't have people just say too much.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. Especially, yesterday I was flying the Remos or 2 days ago I was flying the Remos.
Yeah.
And there was 9 people in the pattern. So every second there's a call, right? And the Remos doesn't have ADSB in.
Yeah.
We just have out. So we couldn't see the traffic.
Yeah.
But then you get all the random guys who are making calls 10, 15 miles out.
Yeah.
And you're like, the whole time I'm like looking around, trying to figure it out, trying to see everybody.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating when you're on final or you're turning base or there's like an actual traffic, maybe emergency collision.
Yeah.
And you can't even jump on the calls because there's 30 other people.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then you got the seagulls and they're not making radio calls and you're looking for them as well. And, so it gets to be a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So flying a Nephi, don't make stupid calls.
Yeah. Right.
I'll call you out on it.
Yeah.
But I think that from a training perspective, I think it's good to be up to date. There's an advisory circular on those. There's a whole training manual released by the FAA on what calls to make, what calls not to make, when it's appropriate.
Yeah.
To stay up to date. And I don't know how much like training material you continue to follow, if you do.
I don't as much as I should, but yeah, I don't.
For us, we have to, stay up to date on especially the advisory circulars. But I don't know if like moving forward, you would be more inclined to read those or stay up to date on the releases by the FAA to see if there's any major changes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think as you get older, you start to realize like, hey, maybe I have a voice here and can advocate for something or another. And I think there's things to be, there's value in all the experiences that you've had after 25 years of flying. And I think that, you start to appreciate as those changes come out of just for that reason, and what I was going to say, the other thing is, whether or not you've flown in the sim here or not, I think beyond just radio calls in your primary training, starting to talk to controllers and tower and ground and getting clearances. And there's such an advantage to the sim and that software where you're actually talking to real people and to be able to do it in a sim environment and not, we all have that fear, or at one point in time had that fear of nervousness of calling and saying the wrong thing and screwing up and being put on the spot. So to be able to sit in there and really talk to someone, and I flew in it on Sunday and the guy was super good. And he was calling people out on real life things. Wasn't just because it was in the sim, like he wasn't going to allow you to do anything wrong. And I think that was great, but you can still know that you can take away a lot of the nerves because you're sitting in the sim, you're not in the plane. So I think, doing something like that to educate yourself on how to talk, when to talk, and what calls to make, there's so much benefit to that.
Now, I haven't talked about the sim on here last time that I did the podcast, and I haven't really showed it on Instagram too much with the new software and the new ATC calls.
Yeah.
You've probably used it more than anybody else. You have Katie.
Yeah.
Explain to everybody kind of what that is, how we use it. Like it just, nobody really knows that we have it.
Yeah.
So,
and I think, when you talk about it, maybe even an episode where it's purely just, showing that in a full flight and you can show it. But so, essentially to dumb it down, you can, like any sim, you can pick a location where you want to start. So let's say you wanted to start in Provo, you set yourself in Provo. The cockpit is such where it's an SR20, and so you have all the buttons and everything are exactly like they would be in the plane. So not only is it realistic to going through checklists and learning all the things that way, but the big thing is to, from a radio perspective, is you're going to call ground, you're going to tell them where you are, you're going to, just like all the real life things, you're going to tell them where you want to go, and he's going to talk. He sees where you are. And he sees if you've had a flight plan, you can file a flight plan. So he'll see the flight plan that you have filed. He'll give you your clearance. You got to read back your clearance. He's going to give you taxi directions, and then you actually taxi just like you would, and it's all on the screen. You can see it. I mean, if it's in an airport, it's exactly the same. And then you're going to depart. He's going to hand you off to departure, and I mean, it's as real as you'll ever see. And it's amazing. I do it now, and I would do it continuously just to stay. To practice like a departure procedure in a super busy environment and changes, and like all of a sudden somebody throws a hold at you, like to be able to do those things in that thing is so awesome. Yeah.
That's fairly new for us. I mean, we just got it last month.
Yeah.
Pilot Edge. The sim we've had for 6 or 7 months.
Yeah.
But the Pilot Edge, which is the ATC, is new. So we're still trying to figure out all the kinks to, the little things to get it working. But it seems like you've used it 3 Sundays in a row now.
Pretty straightforward. It just works.
Yeah.
It doesn't work everywhere, and that's the thing. So you're limited to some of the busier airports. But it's fine. I mean, if anything, that's good for you. You shouldn't do it from your home airport where you're always at. Pick something new that you don't know, and
go to an international,
Boise or wherever. Yeah, international, exactly. So that to me is allows you to there again push yourself out of that comfort zone of flying in different class airspaces that you never have, and understanding the process and saying like you're going to quickly realize like this isn't that big of a deal. Yeah.
And the sim, just for everybody's, it's not just open to our students. Anybody who wants to come rent out the sim, get their IPC done, or just stay current, just want to experience what the sim is like, or brush up on their calls. That's what it's for. That's why we got it. Really, is not just for our students, because really only instrument students would use it majority of the time.
Yeah.
But
I would say that it took me a while to like I can land a plane and I can do okay, and that was hard at first. Like it was terrible, but now this last time, like I flew it and it was very much like you're not going to use it for touch and goes. It's not designed for that, but it will teach you to fly a good pattern, manage your speeds, go through your flows, especially if you've never flown a complex plane, and you can't do it in this, but practicing like when you put the gear down, when you put flaps down, your speeds and all. So there's so many good things that you can use the sim for, especially on days that, in a flight school environment, like it's too windy or it's bad weather, like the sim is the next best thing.
Yeah. Most of the disagreements we have with the sim is it doesn't fly like an airplane, which is true. It's a computer. You're sitting in a room. But what would you say, like, in terms of learning, how much more do you think you would learn in a sim versus in the airplane? I mean, you've done a lot of training in airplanes.
Yeah.
If everybody had a sim, I mean, how much further do you think people could get?
Be better pilots. There's no doubt you'd be better pilots. It maybe limits you on a few things. It doesn't have the rumble and the feel and the seat of your pants type things. I mean, and there's of course sims that can do that, but what you will learn and hone through being able to even pause if you need to. If you have an instructor next to you and pause and let's talk about this, you can't do that in the plane. And so there's so many things that you can do better in some aspects of the training. There, of course, is not for everything. You're going to have to get in the plane and fly, but emergencies and the things that, and I haven't even gotten into that, the things that you can throw at a student to experience of, icing up a plane and feeling like how sluggish controls can be when you start to get heavy with ice. No one can understand that, but you can do it in the sim, and it's as close as real as I think it could be.
Yeah, the emergencies is pretty fun. We've done a few emergency lessons. I mean, you can put the engine on fire, you can fail the flaps, you can fail the engine, you can fail avionics. I mean, basically any emergency scenario, we can simulate it. And it's funny to see students really not know what to do.
Yeah.
And when we're getting like solo ready or check ride ready, and we throw an emergency at them and they freeze up, you're like, well, we might need to adjust some of that training.
Yeah. And everybody does, and it happens to everybody. And that's why it's so awesome.
Yeah.
Let's learn.
Hopefully you'll never experience it in real life, but you got to know how to react quickly.
Yeah.
And even though it's a simulator, it's nice to see students treat it like they're actually in an airplane.
Right.
I had one student, I mean, he started sweating in there. He was so stressed, pulled caps. Like, I mean, he was freaking out. Like,
that's funny.
So even though, you are sitting in a computer room, it can feel real.
Yeah,
that way.
And so just as people know, this isn't your little desktop sim of old. I mean, this is a full-blown G1000 perspective. Like it's the side stick, the throttle quadrant's the same. wraparound screens. Like it's as real as you could get it.
And I'll put a link on the podcast so everybody can go see the
Yeah.
actual sim page.
Yeah.
But it's pretty legit. It's probably one of the nicest,
I agree.
like flight school type sims I've been in.
Yeah. Short of like a full motion sim, which has its own, I mean, that's the next level.
Yeah.
But this is pretty real.
All right, Scott. Well, that's all I got. I mean, unless you.
No, I appreciate you having me on.
You want to add?
Yeah, no.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll have you back on in a few weeks or months.
Sounds good.
But thanks for joining us.
You bet.
See you, everybody.
See ya.